Hey, I'm Michael Dorinda,
And I'm Jake Bennett.
and welcome to episode 193 of the North Meets South web podcast.
Hello, friends. How are you all? Episode 193. Today is May 18th. How's it going, man? You said you were tired.
Tired. Yeah, it's been an adventure the last 4 or 5 days. So
Okay. Let's hear about it.
For those who don't know, I host Laracon AU. So that is number one.
At his house.
Number
He's
two,
getting ready.
historically, I have been responsible for all things Laracon, and that entails picking all of the talks, and that has been the case since the inception of Laracon AU in 2018. So 5 events we've done now, which has been okay. It has worked fine. We've typically put together good programs, but this year, for something a little bit different, I put together a committee to do the review. So we went through a whole committee review process where everyone reviewed every single talk. So there was something like 600 reviews that got done by 5 different reviewers, including myself. And the theory was that at the end of this, the committee would get together for a few hours and we would discuss each of the talks, and we would put them on the short list, and then we would discuss what the final schedule looks like. Who do we put on the schedule? So we did that first step on Monday, last Friday at the time of this recording. And we scheduled 2 hours for that. And we ended up taking 3 hours to go through it all. And at the end of 3 hours, we still had something like 30 talks left to review. So we spent another, we then decided we would build in the functionality to like pre-screen so that everyone would be able to say, accept, reject for their own review of each talk. So that way, when we get to do the follow-up for the last 30 talks, we could just be like thumbs up, thumbs down. And if there was, polarizing views, we would have a discussion. But otherwise, if it was clear one way or the other, that would be the process for that talk. And then we went through into the actual placement, like looking at all of the talks that were selected and figuring out where we placed them on the schedule. So again, we scheduled 2 hours for that last night, thinking it'd be a much quicker process. And I went to bed at midnight. Like we spent 3.5 hours. We finished the committee process at midnight. So we spent 3.5 hours on it. I was then up for another hour and a bit going through and just like doing what I would typically do in that process, is looking at the talks, making sure that they fit into the schedule, how we've decided to put them together, make sure it's consistent with the theme of the conference this year, that we've got a good balance of talks across the spectrum, that we are actually fulfilling the promise of what we set out to do this year, which was to have not necessarily a more technical conference, but certainly one that skews more towards the primary audience and also provides greater depth of exploration. So, I went through a whole process. I had lots of fun. We built our own tooling for this, of course, as developers.
As one does.
And as part of it, with the advent of AI, it actually gave me the ability to build an MCP that exposed all of the relevant details so that I could go back and forth with an AI and say, given what we have put together and our themes and our expectations and our positioning of the conference this year, have we actually met the goal? So we look at the 3 themes, evolve, retool, adapt, are the 3 kind of main themes that we're looking at this year. And then cross-referencing that against the talks that we place to make sure, do we have a good balance across the board of all these different themes? Do we have a good balance of, degree of difficulty of the talk? So, do we have talks in there for everyone? Do we have talks for advanced people, for people right down the middle? And looking at all of that. So there's still 2 talks that are unresolved that the committee are just talking about now. We'll make some final decisions about that, but we'll get the invitations out shortly. And hopefully, once those invitations go out, people will accept. Hopefully, it's the goal. If you invite someone to speak at a conference that they've submitted to, that if they get invited, that they're still in a position to attend the conference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then, we'll 1st of June. Tickets will go on sale. The full schedule will go up. So we're doing something a little bit different to what the other Laravel events do. Like we did it ourselves as well. It was a bit of a cloak and dagger situation where we would sort of keep the CFP open indefinitely, and we would take talks whenever they came, and we would select talks that we found interesting whenever we found them interesting. And it's because of the cloak, and I think our audience, the Australian audience, typically want to have all the information at hand when they're purchasing tickets, especially if they're, the companies are sending them. They've got to, factor it into to budget considerations. Am I going to take something away from this if I'm an individual? If I'm sending people as a team, will they have something that they can bring back to talk about, to put into practice effectively straight away? So all of these things that we've kind of considered this year that I think, based on what the committee have put together, has been really well balanced across the board. I think we're going to get a really good event in terms of, the talks that are presented on stage from some really good speakers that have spoken before. Also a few new people. We obviously like to get some new people into the mix as well, and give different opportunities, and like a couple of different talks, things that I haven't seen done before, that I think Laracon AU is as good a place as any to try something different. It's
Absolutely
kind of what we've been known for. So yeah, looking forward to see how it all plays out.
That's exciting.
I'm very tired because I went to bed at 1:30 and I was up again at 6:30 and went for a run, which was a slog. Like, it was cold, it was windy, and I was really tired. So
yep, that'll do it. Well, that's awesome, man. Congratulations. That's pretty cool. So
thanks,
now, how many talks did you start with that you had to narrow down from?
So this year we had 133, I think.
That's a lot. Yeah. That's way more than I would think.
Yeah, we were actually down on last year. And I think that's actually a good thing. We made the CFP process a bit more involved this year. So typically it's just like, give us your name, where are you traveling from, what is your talk abstract? And the abstract is a free text area, put whatever you feel like in there. This year, because as I said at the top of the show, we're specifically looking for more depth. We want more justification around the topics that are being submitted. And so we asked very specific questions as follow-up. And because it was not just a spray and pray type approach this year, like you had to think, okay, who is this talk for? What are they taking away from it? What do they need to know? What are the practical takeaways? What is my production context? Is this like a theoretical talk, or is this something that you have actually delivered into production, into a production environment? So I think,
did you ask large, like what sort of theme it would fit into? Did you sort of like hint to that at all, to be like, hey, these are some of our key themes. What do you think your talk would fit into? And then so beginner, mid-level, senior, did you kind of ask those sorts of questions too?
Yeah. Yep. So we broadly asked, like, is it a career talk? Is it a product talk? Is it a technical talk? Is it an architecture talk? Is it career? Is it community, products and tools? I think there was 7 or 8 things. And then we asked, is it for everyone? Is it for beginners, intermediate, or advanced? Like, in terms of like senior engineers, technical, that kind of stuff. And then we actually did a bit of classification, like based on what you submitted and based on what you wrote. We ran it through some meta-analysis, not as a decision metric, but just to see, like, this is what the computers think. Like, this is what AI thought of the submission. It was there purely as a meta-analysis tool. The committee didn't see any of this meta-analysis until after they had done their reviews. So everyone put in their own reviews. There was no discussion about anything like that throughout the whole process. So it was interesting to see, and then to see what the committee thought based on, what you said your talk was and what it ended up being. So, some people asked for 45 minutes and there wasn't quite the level of detail in the submission that said, yes, you can get 45 minutes. There were some talks that asked for 30 minutes, but we looked at it and went, well, there's quite a lot here. You'd either have to cut it down to fit to 30 minutes, or we would like you to expand to fill 45 minutes. So yeah, we did lots of different things, very different. There were some things that worked really well. Getting good quality submissions and having people really think through what they were submitting. Like there were people that have submitted before that we saw like a real uplift in, not that what they submitted previously was not good, but to see an uplift because they actually had to be more considered about what they would be presenting.
Right.
Yep. There were some submissions that were difficult. Like if you're going to give an AI talk, typically we would say if you're like really interested in something and you're really into that subject, like that is the best time to talk about it. The worry that we as a committee had was that like being really into a certain aspect or a certain piece of context around AI is very difficult because what you have submitted today can very likely change next week, let alone in 6 months' time.
Right, right.
And particularly if you're like a first-time speaker or someone newer to speaking, it becomes this thing of like you're going to have to keep changing your talk repeatedly over the next 6 months, and that's going to add exponential stress and pressure.
Especially if you're talking about like tooling around AI or something like that, because that's evolving so rapidly. Yeah, it is going to be different by the time you get around to it. Yeah.
So yeah, I just put together the like final summary of what we put together. We covered off, quite well, I think, across the three main themes of the conference. A balance of talks. We've got a really strong close, I think, to the conference that like hits each of those themes one after the other. And just looking at, what is on the schedule and who is on the schedule, I think it's going to be a really solid event this year.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's great. Making progress. That's so hard to stay disciplined to do those things. And it sounds like you've really got a good process this year. I mean, that's a big take. It's a big ask on the committee side of things too. So it speaks well to the people you've chosen to kind of help out with that they've, they're taking it seriously and kind of spending all that time. I mean, that's a full work day between those couple sort of sessions you guys have had working through that stuff. So well, I mean, honestly, for you too, hopefully you're able to see in your post-conference surveys, some sort of difference in the, I guess just the overall feel from the conference goer, from the attendee, that they felt like it was, it matched the themes, that there was enough content for everybody. Because I mean, you do have to be intentional about those things. It's easy to, just kind of let's throw some talks together and there we go. That's the conference. But I think, being really intentional about making sure that there's something there for everybody is helpful. And the fact that you've sort of structured it throughout each day too. So there's something there for each person in a sort of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, just in its sort of the pattern in which it's being presented.
Cognitive loading.
The cadence. There we go.
Yeah.
The cadence of the conference, right? Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
The cognitive loading was something that we tried to be mindful of as well. Like if you get 7 talks all in a row that are all technical, it's hard to reason about. So we made sure that we broke up, not just like that they're all advanced technical talks, but we mix in some some more product focused or career building talks, things like that as well in the mix. So just to keep things balanced a little bit. And then, not putting all the heavy talks right after lunch or anything like that, or at least giving, making sure there's a break before we get into or out of a heavy section of the day. So I think we've had a good balance. I had some lofty goals in terms of what the shape of the program would look like and tried to kind of reprogram it a little bit. It became very clear once we went through the talks and once we started to try and place the talks that wasn't going to necessarily work, because that relies on you obviously getting submissions in those categories. And so, we've got some really good data now as well. People have asked in previous years, why didn't we see more advanced talks? Well, we've got very clear data now that says like people just don't submit those talks. And not only do they not, like, it's very difficult to give a very good technical talk that is actually audience engaging and like broadly applicable. So
no, I definitely feel that. That's very true.
as someone who gave a very good technical talk a few years ago, yes.
It is. Like, it is hard.
You put a ton of effort and iterations and like putting stuff in and then having to cut stuff out and then to, and then not only just figuring out what do you put in the talk, but how do you present it both visually and how do you communicate that stuff as well?
Yeah.
Yep. To the point where like you had all of the return types and the property types and all of this kind of stuff in there. And, we spoke to you beforehand.
Yeah. Like, I said, don't do it. Get it out of there. It's too much noise.
Like, you're not putting production code up there.
Correct.
You need to be able to communicate this stuff very clearly. So
that was so helpful having other people's eyes on, and I mean, it really was. And you just needed to have advanced sort of time to get through and be like, yeah, like all that stuff was just like, that wasn't the main point. And so get it out of there and just be super clear. Only show what needs to be shown. And so, but yeah, I think the challenge with technical talks a lot of times is that you almost get into this mode where you're trying to prove to the audience that you know what you're talking about. And that's really dangerous because it becomes not valuable really quickly because you get too technical, too in the weeds, and you lose the application. And so it's like you really have to try and walk this fine line of sharing enough technical information to help them understand what the pattern is or what it is that you're trying to get after, but also stay on the surface so that they can make a link to their reality, right? Their domain. It applies sort of generally across whatever, whatever they're trying to build. So anyway, that's, that is tough. They are difficult to do. I was just talking with some people on our teams today. Actually, we're rebuilding our main website, and we asked like the client services team. We said, hey, on the services page, which client services, they would be the team responsible for knowing how we talk about, how we speak about, and how we market our services to clients, which is why they would be called the client services team. Okay, so we said we need you to give us good descriptions for each of these services. Like, how do you sell them, right? Okay, well, guess what we got back?
Definitely not that.
AI, we got back AI, right? Ran it through the scanner, and it's like, yeah, that's 100% AI. And I'm like, okay, this is just irresponsible, right? Like, this is so, like, I hate it when people do that. I think it's called sloppy pasta now. It's not copy pasta, it's sloppy pasta. It's like, there's like a sloppypasta.io or something out there where it talks about just like, you paste a prompt into chat and then you just, here's the result. Let me know what you think, right? There's like been no critical thought about it at all. They've not modified one line of it. It's just, here's my work, see ya. Like they present the work as their own. And it's like, it's just so frustrating because it's like, I could do that. Like I did do that. That's what the like the example text is just AI stuff. Like if I wanted that, I wouldn't even ask you. And so I don't know. I think sometimes here's what I'm getting at. For them, what I told them is I said, okay, we need to use this responsibly. I'll loop back around to the talk idea in a minute here, but we need to use this responsibly, right? So I remember when I was trying to build my talk, I had a very difficult time trying to figure out how to structure it. But then what I eventually ended up doing is like, okay, I'm just going to talk for like a half hour straight. I'm just going to sort of push everything out there that I know and very loose structure, just put it all out there, transcribe it all.
Yeah.
Then I was able to go through all my thoughts and sort of break them up into sections and then organize my thoughts and then, okay, polish this up. What do I need to add? What do I need to take away? Sort of thing. The cool thing is now you can have a lot of that assisted with AI, right? So what I encourage them to do is, number one, prepare like you're going to be selling this service to a client. Like get together your list of bullet points, your ideas, like brainstorm. And I think all of these things generally apply also to talks, which is why I'm saying it, right? This is kind of how it applies, right? How it loops back to talks. Get together all your thoughts, brainstorm, write it all down. Then talk for 5 to 10 minutes. Just talk it out. Then use the AI to say, take what I said and help me organize it into my main points, but use the words that I used to describe it. Like, do not make up what I said. Don't polish it. Don't correct it. Just use what I said, but organize it for me. And then you can say, oh, okay, so this is now my rough draft. This is sort of the order in which I need to say these things, but it's using my own voice, which is so important. And then you like take 2, right? And then you rinse and repeat, right? Kind of do the same thing, building up structure as you go. But then that way you're sort of using AI to assist you in organizing your thoughts and maybe even arguing with you about what are some questions that a person who's listening to this talk might ask, and then helping you fill in some of those blanks, right? That is a productive way to use AI. And that's not going to come back as when you scan it with the copywriter thing. It's not going to be like 100% AI, right? And so I think, writing a talk now, if I had the tools now or if I had the tools back then that I have now, I think it would have been much easier for me to sort of find my way through.
Yeah.
And so that is an encouragement for people who are trying to do technical talks. I think that sort of strategy can help you quickly diagnose the things that are missing in your explanations. Give you an alternative perspective that you don't necessarily have, but then allow you to use your voice to fill in the blanks. And so, anyway,
it's kind of wild to think, considering how advanced AI is now, that when you gave that talk 3 years ago, none of that tooling existed.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Like, it just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't
none
a
of it. No, none of it
now,
existed.
like last year when I put, I have a kind of similar process. I was listening to Will King talking about how he puts together his talks, which is a very similar process to what I do. Is I just like put things into an Apple Note, like nothing fancy, just an Apple Note, just discrete thoughts. I see, a tweet or a LinkedIn post or an article or somewhere, and I just put it all in there. I'm like, this all kind of fits together, which is what I did last year over a period of 4 or 5 months before Laracon AU. And then probably about 6 weeks before the conference, I said, okay, let's, I asked, it was GPT at the time. I said, here's my note.
Here's my corpus.
Here's my corpus of data. Go and look to see, is it coherent? Like, what is thematically, what flows through all of those notes? And then I would then go, okay, let's get rid of this. Let's keep this. Let's, refine this. And then, go through and start figuring out, does it actually make sense, and how do all the pieces fit together? Because for a long time it's just kind of background thoughts that I'm like, this feels like it's related, and then trying to distill it later, and like for me that works, because by and large, like I'm all of the thoughts are in my head. It's just a matter of getting them into a coherent structure, in a proper storytelling structure that flows from start to finish. Technical can still be that. Like, you can still have a story behind your presentation. And I think Will and Josh, because this is on their Riff and Refine podcast, they were talking about this. It's important. Like, there's 3 things that you hit. It's like the content, it's the delivery, and there's like entertainment. Like, people need to be engaged through the talk. If you've got a 45-minute talk that is technical, you will lose people if they're not entertained. Make a joke, do something, like, just to keep people engaged in the process, because it's a long time to listen to a technical.
When they hear
thing,
everybody laugh, they're going to look up from their laptop and like re-engage. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of go for too long, and it's like you got to get a hook back in and be like, oh, okay. And you have to remember too your audience as well. Like, a lot of developers struggle with attention, right? So it's like, either they're hyper focused on the thing that they're doing currently, like, which is like maybe on their laptop, or they're just distracted. And so, anyway, you got to kind of bring them back in a couple times.
So, the really, really good ones are the ones where you can see everyone shut their laptop and sit up. Those ones are very hard to put together.
Yeah, they are. I mean, there's so much, I don't know. There's so many good tips out there now on writing good talks too. Like, there's, I was just reading this article the other day. It was called First Make Me Care. Right. And I was doing this so Graham had like a paper he had to write, and he had to write a paper about this, like, he had to pick a crime and then write a story about it. Like, it was almost like write your own true crime podcast thing, right? Which was pretty cool. But like, at first, it was like he basically just said what happened. Like, he just stated the thing. And I was like, nah, you can't do that, dude. You have to like give them something that's like crazy, like, what in the world? So it was like, I think he ended up starting like, did you know that the biggest bank heist in like one of the biggest bank heists in world history. It required an insane amount of manual labor and required digging a tunnel that was 27 meters long. And it was like, interesting. So it's like, okay, I want to know about this, right? So it's like you have to, exactly. Tell me more, make me care. That's like the job of the person who's giving the talk. It's like you have to sort of whet their appetite a bit and get them interested in the thing that you're talking about before you jump into all the technical details. So anyway,
why am I going to listen to you for the next 30 minutes
or
45 minutes as it were? So
you got it.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Let's see here. Is there any other sort of challenges at work you've been facing? Any technical challenges? Speaking of technical things.
Yeah. I mean, I've finally gotten around to, I think we've spoken about this like ages ago, this quote tool that we've got that's always been difficult to test. It's been not the most maintainable software. Like it's been around for a while, but it works. So just don't touch it. But
and is this the one where you reach out to multiple lenders and you sort of build out quotes from multiple people and give them back?
Yeah.
Is that how that works?
Well, we abstract over it. It would be nice if the lenders had APIs that we could do this because it would make our lives easier. But no, this is like an abstraction that we have built that is largely manually derived. It's like lenders don't all have the same process for communicating the changes. Sometimes it's like a PDF document that just has the current rates in it. Sometimes it's a BDM sending an email that is like, here's what's new. And so it's up to someone to actually figure out what has changed.
And then they have to feed it in somehow.
And then there's like a giant spreadsheet that we have, and each sheet
is it actually a spreadsheet?
Workbook,
it's actually a spreadsheet.
And this is a spreadsheet that like we manage. So it's one person that's responsible for this. And then they go through, they figure out what has changed. Then each lender has their own like sheet within this workbook that is, and it's like, even with AI now, it's not necessarily clear. Like you couldn't say AI, go and read this and like figure out what's, I mean, you probably could now, but go and figure out what's different. And it all boils down to like this thing that takes the inputs from all the different lenders and it puts it all into one screen. So we've finally in a position where I started this refactor process like 3 months ago, maybe 4 months ago now.
Okay.
Where we had like an idea. And so I actually sat down and I finally started using a solo term from Aaron Francis.
Okay, sure.
It's very good. You should try it. Soloterm.
I've tried it. Yeah, it's good.
I think that's how he presents it. Every time he says soloterm, it's soloterm.com. It's very good. You should try it. So I've been giving that a go. And I think it's not really a departure from what I've been doing. So I've used Matt Pocock's Grill Me skill. I always go through and like figure out what the plan is. And then I've got a skill that writes a spec. And then I've got a skill that takes that spec and distills it into like vertical slices. And someone else is using the skill at the moment. They said, we have different opinions on what vertical slices are. I said, yeah, I think it's a bit hit and miss because AI, likes to go this way instead of this way. And because I've predominantly been building like backend code and APIs, API endpoints, there's no front end. So I can't speak to the accuracy of the vertical slices, but for like test and implementation and like here is an endpoint that works end to end, like it's worked very well for that. And then I've got like a task implementer, which is essentially a way of keeping context confined to like go and do this one task, finish it, write any learnings to a learnings file, and then you clear the session, you start again, and you keep going until it's done.
A Ralph loop?
A Ralph loop, yeah. A human in the Ralph loop is the way that I look at it. Because I still, I sit there and I will review every task. I will look at the code for every discrete piece of work, and I will, if things need to be changed, I will change them. If something changes in this task and that impacts downstream, I say, well, we need to go and update the downstream tasks. So it's definitely enabled me to do things that I would not have otherwise had time to do, which is great. There has been some certain finagling. It's written some weird tests. Like I had an abstract function declared, and the way that it wanted to test this, because you cannot instantiate an abstract function, a child of an abstract class that doesn't implement an abstract method, you cannot instantiate that inside of a PHP unit test because it will blow up your PHP unit test because you haven't implemented this class, which is expected. That is the language saying, oh no, you need to implement this method on this class. But there's no way to test that. So what does Claude do? It goes, I'm going to execute this using like shell exec, and then it's going to pipe out to php-r. And I'm like, no. So that I've now got this shared like testing rules document that's like, do not test the framework, do not test the language,
But the question is, does it listen to you? Right? Does it actually do it?
It has been. Right? It has been, which is good, because I've like codified it in the task planner and the task implementer, and it's in like the Claude rules for this specific module. It tried to write a test for a database migration there, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, the migration happens. Don't test the migration. The framework guarantees that the migration does what we want it to do. Our job is to test what happens in our code once the migration has run. Please stop. So it's just these little like weird testing things that I'm like, don't do that. Go and put this in in your rules. Don't do it again. Yes, you're right. Sometimes it goes and ignores those rules and it'll do things anyway, because its more immediate prompt, its task that it's working on or whatever, says you must test this. So it goes, this says I should test this, which overrides the system prompt that says don't do this kind of test. And so it's like this guy, and it's like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh yeah, my rules said that, but the task. I'm like, so it's definitely a balancing act. That like, these are the cardinal rules that you must always follow, irrespective. Yeah. But I have also put in there a rule that is very explicitly, you must red green refactor.
Okay.
You must write one test at a time. And you must make sure that one test that you wrote fails in the expected way first before you go and write the production code to make it pass. And then if you think the code can be refactored, do it then, but never more. Because a lot of the time what it wants to do is write all of its tests based on its acceptance criteria and then go and try and implement them. And it's just,
okay.
I have found that using one test, one red-green refactor cycle to get to one outcome gets it to write much higher quality and much more consistent code. Because it's only focusing on one thing at a time. It's not focusing on writing 10 tests and then having the context of 10 tests there while it's trying to contextualize writing the code that passes all of those 10 tests. But because I'm working in vertical slices, it knows that there's like 10 different acceptance criteria there that it needs to do. So it's trying to, so you've got to really tell it, no, one thing at a time.
It's funny that we're reinventing junior developers. I mean, like, essentially that's what you're training it to say, like, okay, listen, instead of trying to do 5 things at once, just work on a single piece at a time. Like, build a test, write a test, make it fail. Okay, now go implement the code, make sure it passes. Okay, now commit it. Now take that code that's committed. Okay, now you're good. You have a green wall at your back now, right? Okay, now write the next thing. It should fail. Now get it to green. Okay, now refactor, right? But it's like people are assuming like, oh, we'll just, the AI will take care of it. And yes, possibly. But if you want to get the best quality, you still you have to end up teaching the AI to use what are still best practices from a prior age, right? And so, it's interesting.
I think the thing that differentiate it from like a true green junior developer, it does have the context of what things are. So if I tell it this is a regression guard, or I tell it this is a smoke test, or I tell it, you don't have to explain the concepts. It can go, you assume that it knows because it's a programming agent, but if it doesn't, it can go and look it up very quickly and apply that.
And that's the context.
So that's been very useful.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I've got, in the process of refactoring all this stuff where we're deleting all this duplicated code, we're hoisting up into base classes, like we're modeling this into proper data structures. We're not passing arrays around anymore. We're using like instance properties rather than passing variables down through methods endlessly, which makes it very difficult to test. So, it was important that the smoke test goes, make sure like what we have here that says the outputs are correct before we touch any code remains passing. You cannot change the test. The test guarantees that whether what we have is right or wrong, it guarantees that our understanding of the world does not change before and after the refactoring happens. So it's really good knowing. And there are a couple of places where we don't have the test. And it's okay, go and write the test first that asserts the public surface of this class before we change the implementation. It's also giving us assurances that, the code at least does what we think it should do. As I said, whether what it does is correct or not, we're making sure that it does not change between what we have now that we know to be working in production.
Yeah.
Whether it's correct, we know it to be working.
Yeah.
And after we refactor, like we take out all this duplication, we hoist things into base classes, we inject classes into things. We've got like attributes. I finally, what do we, PHP 8 whenever the attributes came in, I finally found a good use for it where we annotate these knockout methods with like a knockout attribute and give it a label. And so now we can just say, go and assess this knockout class, and it will use reflection to go and find all the knockout methods and then run them all. And each method is just responsible for doing its own thing. And if it fails,
like functional programming. Yeah.
Yeah. And if it fails, then it's got like a fail method, which goes, it's just a thin layer over the top of message bag that we've pulled up into the base class.
The caller. Yeah.
Yep, the caller. And it just goes, okay, take the method name based on the reflection property. So the method name becomes the
knockout method.
Yep.
Right.
So it's like assess minimum loan.
Oh, so that's really smart, actually, because then you don't have to have like some sort of special, kind of how we used to have in Laravel models. It'd be like first name attribute, or it'd be like get first name attribute, and then whatever set last name attribute, and then it's like, oh, that's last underscore name. It's like, that's just weird because you had to know all these conventions and weird stuff like that. Now it's like, nope, just do knockout attribute. It's a knockout class. It's a knockout method. That's it. So scan, give me all the knockout methods, run them all.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
run them all, one after
really
the other,
smart, actually. Yeah.
Which ended up working really well because it did want to go down the conventional path because it looked at the existing code and said, oh, all of these follow the same thing, that it's assess blah, assess minimum method, loan amount, assess, whatever. And I was like, yes, that's what we had before, but that was only there because that's what was there. Is that appropriate for a world where we're in PHP 8.5? And so now, we can annotate things with an attribute, know that it'll run through and fine, and that way you don't have to worry about, because we were looking at like properties, and the properties would be a true false, that as you run through each of these things, it would then go and flip the boolean, and then you've got to go and look, and then but then you've got like this magic string mapping between the property name and the values, and you're doing these two steps. I was like, no, we can simplify the whole thing. And we've improved the process as well, because now we can, at the moment it's pass or fail. You will see like some condition has failed, but you don't know why it's failed. Whereas now we can put a message in there because we're using this specification. We're getting so off the track here into the weeds. But we're using the specification pattern. So we just like run the specification. It'll either pass or it'll fail. And if it fails, it's got like, this is the message that your loan amount exceeds your capacity for borrowing. And like, it'll put that in there, and it's consistent across all of the lenders, across all of the institutions, across every iteration. It's just one place to update the message, and it will always come back in the same way for every lender, which we don't have currently. Currently it's pass fail. Now it's like it fail and
you have
fail
a message.
Because.
Yeah.
So it's just about improving the whole experience. But our orchestrator, like the top level lender class, would have like a get output method, and it would like instantiate the calculator. It would instantiate the knockout. It would pass the calculator into the knockout. It would then, rebuild the shape. So we duplicated the response shape across 30 or 40 different lenders. And it's like all of this, man, it's just like now these orchestrator classes have 2, potentially 3 methods. One is calculations, and it returns the calculator because only the institution knows what its calculator is. The second method is knockouts because, again, only the institution knows what its knockout class is. And optionally 3 is a name method where like the class, we resolve it from the class name by default. But if we need like special casing or the name doesn't quite match, the name method will override the default lookup that's in the base class. And that's it, because the base class is now responsible for going, okay, give me this calculator, this knockouts. Here is the response shape. The response shape is now a DTO. For backwards compatibility, we check, is it arrayable or is it just a plain array? If it's arrayable, we call toArray on it, with the intent that like once they're all refactored, because we're not going to do this in one go, we're going to test the process as we go one at a time. Once they're all refactored, we narrow that to arrayable. Everything is just calling to array on there, and it all gets returned. And if we need to, because these properties, for whatever legacy reason, are like not underscore, they're not snake case or camel case, they are just words. So it's like loan space amount.
Nice.
Base underscore base space rate. All of this kind of stuff. It's like, well, this is duplicated in 40 different places. Now it's just like in here. And then when we decide that we no longer want to use spaces in there because this is not exposed to the front end directly anywhere, it goes into the front end and the front end reducible anyway.
It's all your
we
code,
just, in one place in this like to array method of this DTO, we now just go, okay, well, all of these things that are spaces are now base rate as a camel case thing, lower camel case. So it's been a lot of work to get there. There's been, and because we're doing it as stacked PRs. And it's been funny watching the people that have been reviewing the PRs for me go, oh, what is this method here? What is this? This doesn't seem to be used anymore. So go and look at the next PR. And you can see by the time I get to the next PR to review the comments, and the next PR, it's like, oh, I see now. Or, yeah, this was here as a placeholder, but it's been removed there. Or can we add types to all of the things? Yes, we will, but that's like a task for down the road once, like we're waiting for the abstractions to emerge. We don't want to prematurely, even though we've got the context, AI can go and look at all 30 of the things and look at the common patterns and decide, okay, this is all the same and it will be the same after. Like, we don't know that it will be the same. So it's kind of, what do we defer to everything being done and what do we make safe assumptions about now? The specifications, we know that there's like 11 concrete things that are reused everywhere, and it might change like a label. So there's like a minimum threshold, a maximum threshold. So that's the like root class, but then there may be like an LTV minimum, which is a loan to valuation, I think but the minimum is there. So we just extract it, we extend it, and we use that specifically because in that case, we want to change what the return message says. It's not going to say like minimum threshold. It's going to say minimum threshold of blah. So it's just, I'm getting very excited about having an architected system, but it's also helped us kind of figure out where are the things that have been truly duplicated, where are the things that are similar. I learned this phrase last night from someone called class table inheritance, which had me very excited because we've got like all of each lender has
inheritance.
Yeah. So it's like kind of like single table inheritance, but it's slightly different. Single table inheritance is like where everything is one table.
Yeah.
And all
like
of the fields
user,
exist
admin
for every
user,
record. Yeah.
Manager
but
user.
all of the fields exist for every record, irrespective of whether or not every record is used for every response. So an admin user might have like a bunch of extra flags, but that's not relevant in user context. Right. Mm-hmm, yep. So whereas class table inheritance, you have like the narrow, like these things like first name, last name, email address. That applies to all users. Yeah, kind of. But I think it's also different to polymorphic. Slightly different to polymorphic. I couldn't tell you the difference. I know that there was a distinction between the two. But so your user table has first name, last name, email, password, and then your admin table would resolve automatically with class table inheritance. But your admin table might have those additional but effectively. So it's like object-oriented programming, but in your database. But I was looking at this at 1:00 this morning. So I don't know exactly what it is, but it was very interesting.
We should talk about that one next time. And the difference between polymorphic and class-based.
But it was very interesting to me because every lender has like a base rates table, and it's like lender _ base _ rates, like for each name. And like some of them are consistent. Others have got different values. So it's like, okay,
so why try and force them all into one table? Just give them their own.
They've each got their own tables at the moment, but like if we could abstract it behind like a
single
unified base rate thing, and then using class table inheritance, it would know that for this lender, it needs to go look at that other table to get, we could simplify
the rest of the pieces,
all of our database queries because it would all be handled for us. So I want to look into that as like a next step thing.
Well, that's exciting.
It's been good.
Yeah. We need to do some.
We've been talking about it for like 5 years. We
need to do something similar for one of our applications. I saw somebody was talking, I think it was Freak maybe was talking about that. Like, I can't remember if he called it Brain or something like that, where it basically just scans your your code base and sort of shows you all the connections, right? Like breaks it all down for you.
Shane Rosenthal was talking about that.
Okay.
I think, or Simon, one of the native PHP boys was talking about.
Yeah, that looks
something
cool.
like that, where it shows you like a.
Yeah. It reminded me also almost of like the MySQL Explain, the visual MySQL Explain, or Visual SQL Explain, something like that. Remember the Tobias Petri, where you just kind of paste in the SQL statement and does the explain thing, and then it shows you the whole tree, like all the places that it went, and all the things that it did, and all the queries that it made, and all the times it repeated itself, and all that stuff. Like it's sort of like it builds you out this big graph. So that seemed pretty cool. But we are at 45 minutes, so I am gonna say we should call this one 193.
You can do all the talking next episode. I think it is 193.
193. Hey, folks, thanks for hanging out with us. northmeetssouth.audio/193. Hit us up on Twitter at Michael Dorinda, Jacob Bennett, or North South Audio. Did I say it wrong? northmeetssouth.audio/193? I think is what it's supposed to be.
That's right.
Not North South. northmeetssouth.audio or northmeetsouth. What is it? .audio. Thank you. It's that time of night. And of course, rate us up in your podcatcher of choice would be much appreciated. Okay, folks, until next time, we'll see you.
Bye.